Morning, everybody. I thought the next couple of weeks would be useful for me to deliver to you the presentation that I did yesterday for the PFS. Now, it's an hour's worth in total, so I'm going to be delivering it over the next 2 sessions for you. And the reason I think it's useful is because it's an overview, really. It's a quick whip through of what you need to know to make your revision efficient and successful. So I hope that it will be useful to the new members, and I also hope it will be useful to the oldies who already know this stuff, but it doesn't do any harm to be reminded once in a while to keep them on track. So I hope you enjoy the presentation, and let me know what you think of it. Here we go then. Human beings are actually hardwired to forget. I'm Lisette Offley, and I live just outside Henley-on-Thames on the river with my husband. And for the last 30 years, I've been helping people use their brains better. For 20 years, I was a teacher, and for the last 10 years, I've been teaching, and I'm a trainer, and I've been a therapist as well. And during that time, I was attracting teenagers who were falling behind at school because of very difficult medical conditions that doctors couldn't help them with. Things like anorexia and ME, really tricky stuff. And I would help them let go of that and then teach them how to organise themselves and revise so they could go back to school and catch up with the work they'd missed, but forge ahead and get the grades they needed to go to their first choice universities. And a while back, a colleague of mine said, you know what, I reckon the IFAs could do with some of the help you've been giving these teenagers. And that's how Genius Material was born. Now, going back to my rather extraordinary statement about forgetting, physiologically, we human beings are pretty much the same as we were 10,000 years ago when we lived in caves. And it was imperative that the unconscious, the automatic part of the brain, the part that makes sense of the world and keeps us safe, it was imperative that that part of the brain would allow human beings to forget in order to survive. Now, that might sound like an odd thing until you think about how important it is to forget where the herd of deer was seen 3.5 months ago, but remember where they were seen last night. Now, that was very important to our survival. Forgetting is a useful skill even now. How important is it to us to remember not where we left our car keys 2 years ago, but 2 minutes ago? So the unconscious mind will automatically let older information slip away in favour of newer information, which is probably more current and more useful, which is very useful in some circumstances, but not going to help us with exams. It means that we're likely to forget 80% of what we learnt within 2 weeks, and I know some of you can relate to that. Also, 71% of people are not revising according to how their brain prefers to learn. Is it any wonder that so many people are failing exams? Now, what I'm going to do with this short amount of time I've got with you is to run through the principles of learning. Show you the sorts of things you can do to make your notes easier to remember and keep them in your head. Because once you know how to revise, you'll pass your exams first time. You'll enjoy the revision process, really. And your self-esteem and confidence will shoot through the roof. And you might even consider going on to chartered status, because exams now are an opportunity to prove what you can do rather than something that's likely to trip you up. Now, we've got here a graph showing you in pink what tends to happen to most people when they sit down to revise. You see, they forget most within a day and continue to forget over time. However, if you follow the Genius Material system, you will remember 80% or so of what you've learnt forever. This graph goes up to 6 months, but you can see that the blue area shows that you've remembered nearly everything that you've learnt. And that's more use to you and to your clients. So what does that entail then? You know, remembering stuff is very, very simple. There are only 3 keys to learning. The first is that you spend enough time with the information in the first place for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory. The second key is that you make brain-friendly notes, the sort of notes that your brain can relate to. And the third key is that you revisit that information on a regular basis. And that's all there is to it. And so why do you need to make all of this fuss? It's to get your brain's attention. To get your brain's attention. It's reckoned that you are taking in about 10,000 bits of information a second. I don't know who's counting, but I'm sure you appreciate that we are absolutely bombarded with information. 10,000 bits of information a second. Fortunately, your brain is filtering out all the time what it thinks is not important right now. So it's doing that on the basis of what's important to your survival first and foremost. So for example, if you're crossing the road, you're far more likely to pay attention to the oncoming traffic than you are to the colour of the bows on the shoes of the woman walking the dog on the pavement behind you. You might have noticed those on another occasion, but not right now. Your brain is automatically keeping you safe and making sense of the information that you're receiving. So, because you're receiving so much information and your brain is automatically filtering out that information that's not important to your survival, and let's face it, revision isn't. I know the stakes are high, I know it's important to you, but your exams don't come under the same category as being safe as you cross the road, so we have to compensate. And so therefore all we need to do is to spend enough time with the information, make brain-friendly notes, and revisit the information on a regular basis. To demonstrate how easy it is to remember information if you do it in a brain-friendly way, we are going to have a go at learning a snippet of information using a technique called memory pegs, which I'm sure many of you will have come across. As you can see, I've got the numbers 1 to 10 here, and I've drawn pictures of objects that rhyme with the number. Before we go any further, we're obviously going to have to learn the memory pegs. They're very simple. Once you've got them, you'll be able to use them over and over and over again. So here we've got 1 gun, 2 shoe, you hear the rhymes in this, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 line, as in fishing line that I've drawn here, and 10 hen. Okay, so just think about the rhymes and the pictures. That's it. So let's test that then. This is the easy bit, by the way. So what was it that rhymed with 1? Gun. 2 shoe. 3 tree. 4 door. 5 hive. 6 sticks. 7 heaven. 8 gate. 9, that's it, 9 line. 10 hen. Right, that's it for now. And that's as far as we're going to go for the moment. So first we need to let that just settle in the brain a little bit, and then I'll show you how to use that to retain information that would be useful. Now let's have a look at the keys to learning. Key number 1. You have to spend enough time with the information in the first place for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory. Someone rang me up a few weeks ago and said, I've got my exam next Tuesday, can you help? Well, the short answer is, well, yes, I can, a little bit. I can help you be efficient with your revision between now and then, and that's got to help. But he and I both knew that he wasn't doing his work justice, that in just the few days that he had, there was no way that he was going to be able to get through all the information in his course manual, because he said he actually hadn't opened it yet. So he had quite a lot of material to look at. So make sure you've got enough time before the next exam before you start revising, because you need to spend enough time with it for your brain to actually comprehend what's there in front of you. Now, most people, when they sit with information, they fall into two camps. The first is the people who tend to write out everything they've got in front of them. And I know I certainly used to fall into this category. I distinctly remember, I can remember exactly where I was, what the circumstances were, when I was doing my A-level biology revision. And on the first day that I sat down, I'd got into my head I was going to write notes, revision notes. I also knew that notes wasn't copying, but that's probably as far as I got. But you know, before I even got to the bottom of my first side of A4 paper, I was copying out every word. Why? Because I was afraid of missing something important. So I definitely used to belong to camp number one. But there's another camp that some of you will belong to. And that's the people who read and reread their manual over and over again. Yes, some of you can relate to that. Well, that doesn't work either. That sends your brain to sleep. So if you've ever realised that you've just read the last paragraph twice and you still can't remember what you've just read, that's why. So if you belong to either of those two camps, the best thing you can do right now is to stop camping, because there's a better way of doing this. Let me tell you more. You actually need to get involved with the information. Just copying it mindlessly or reading it over and over isn't getting involved. Your unconscious automatic mind needs to feel that this stuff is important, and you're going to give it that message by doing things such as reading it out loud. Using more of your brain to do that is making more effort. It gets the message it's more important. Read it out loud. Act it out. Now, you may not want to do this in the middle of the office while other people are watching. I don't know. Maybe you do. And maybe you're thinking that the subject matter is so dry that perhaps it's not the thing that lends itself to acting. But you still can, you know, in the way that you know that the bits of information you're learning are relevant to your clients, and your clients are coming to you with real life scenarios, and you're applying the information that you know to a real life person. You can act out, to a certain extent, the information that you're imparting to your client, the stuff that you're learning. As far as you're able to, you need to get interested in what you're doing, and you'll be getting your brain interested if you are acting it out and saying it out loud. Because you need to spend only about 20% of your time reading your course manual. Only about 20% of your time. You need to spend the other 80% of your time actually manipulating the information. That's not mindlessly copying or just rereading it. It's manipulating the information into brain-friendly notes. So let me tell you about that now. When you are making the notes that you're going to make, just notice that you will automatically be spending enough time with the information. You will automatically be taking care of key number one, spend enough time with the information. Now, as human beings, we have a lot in common with each other when it comes to learning. At the same time, we also have differences. Our brains are wired up differently according to the sorts of experiences that we've had and the preferences that we have. And it's also true to say that we learn in different ways. Some of us prefer to learn one way, some of us another way. It's also true to say that no two people on this planet process, store and retrieve information in exactly the same way. We are all different. Monty Python was right. But when you discover what your preferences are, your revision will be that much faster and easier. So how are you going to find out what your preferences are? Well, I have some ideas up my sleeve on that score. But here's a for example. Everyone falls along the extroversion-introversion continuum somewhere. It is a continuum. It's not black and white. You're not just this or you're just that. You'll be somewhere along the line, and also you'll move along the line depending on the circumstances and how you're feeling. But if you tend towards extroversion, and that doesn't mean you're dancing on the tables last thing on a Friday night, although I guess it might do, but that's not what it's referring to. Extroversion-introversion is referring to how you prefer to spend your downtime. That's to say, you've had a busy day at work. How do you choose to relax? Do you look outside of yourself? Extroversion, do you look towards other people for company? Or do you look inside yourself for company? Would you prefer to spend the end of a long and busy day quietly? So that will give you a clue. If you tend towards extroversion, going outside of yourself, then when it comes to doing your revision, you'd do well to find someone to explain what you've just learnt to. So find somebody who's remotely interested in what you're learning, or someone who's tolerant of hearing for the umpteenth time what you're learning. If you can't find someone who'll listen, then tell the cat. Talk to the trees. Seriously, when you can externalize what you're learning, then that works very well for people who tend towards extroversion. Get yourself into discussions about what you're learning. And maybe find a study buddy, somebody who's doing the same exam as you. Do your notes together. Talk about how you're going to set your notes out. Test each other. Talk about what you've just learnt. If you tend towards the introversion side of the scale, you don't want to be doing that. You need to be spending time quietly reflecting on what you've just learnt. You do well to read around the subject and maybe to read that course manual once again after you've made your notes. Just that section of the course manual after you've made that section of notes. Read other stuff around what you've just learnt. And listen to information about that subject. Audio recordings. Go to lectures. So you see the sorts of things that you can do depending on how your brain already prefers to wind down at the end of the day. And so it is with lots of other ways that we can discover how your brain processes information. This is just one example. I will say, though, that your visual system, the more you can use it, the more efficient your revision will become, the more you can use your eyes in a particular way. Because 50% of your brain's pathways, 50%, are connected to vision. That's an enormous amount of brain power dedicated to your visual system. And remember we said that you receive 10,000 bits of information per second? Well, 90% of that is visual. And it's no wonder then your brain processes visual information 60,000 times faster than text. 60,000 times faster than text. They say every picture paints 1,000 words. Well, there you go. Anytime that you can use your visual system, pictures, diagrams, charts, symbols, that sort of thing, your learning is going to improve 4 times over. So I want to show you ways that we can do that. And we are talking about you. You will be sufficiently visual. If you're sitting there thinking that you're not a very good visualizer, don't worry about it. What I'm going to ask you to do, you will be sufficiently visual to take advantage of what we know about how the brain processes information. It'll save you time, frankly, and that's what we're all about. So what about those memory pegs then? Do you remember what rhymes with 1? Of course. Gun. 2, shoe. Remember what colour it was? There we go. 3, tree. What sort did I actually draw? Yep. 4, what colour was it? Door. 5, of course, hive. 6, stick. 7, heaven. 8, gate. 9, line. And 10, hen. Good. Now let's have a look at how you would actually use these pegs to attach some new information. I want you to bear in mind that you're coming into this process halfway through. The information we're going to attach are my keywords from a section of course manual where I've already extracted the keywords. If you were doing this, you'd have done the whole process and this would make that much more sense to you. So I just want you to bear with me. I'm going to stick now my keywords onto each of these memory pegs, and I want you to make associations with the stuff we're trying to remember about benefits in kind with the memory pegs. And I'll show you what I mean as we go along, but I need you to do the work as well. Even though I acknowledge that you've not been there right through from the very beginning, that this is more like random stuff attached to the pegs. The first thing, my first keyword is lower paid employees. The second thing is they're earning less than £8,500 and that they're taxed at second-hand value or market value on the money that they earn. So those are my 3 key things that I have to remember. How would you associate lower paid employees with gun? How about something like, and this isn't very PC, but you don't have to be PC when you're doing your revision, just don't share it. Lower paid employees. So we've got a lower paid employee who's not making ends meet, so he's grabbed his gun, he's gone into the newsagents and it's a stick up and he's grabbed the money from the till. Gun, lower paid employees. How are we going to associate shoe with less than £8,500? Well, I don't think that shoe's worth £8,500, do you? I've never seen a pair of shoes that cost that to buy. Maybe you have. But certainly those shoes that I've drawn are the sort that you buy for £3.99 from the market. So they're definitely less than £8,500. So I'm going to associate the price of the shoe with the threshold of £8,500. Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, oh my goodness, how could I attach something like taxed at second-hand value or market value with a tree? I could make something up. I could think about an artificial tree that we've got, and I could imagine that it was donated by somebody else who is upgrading to a better artificial tree. So now we've got an artificial tree which is showing signs of wear. Some of the branches are a bit bent and a bit bedraggled. So we've now got a second-hand tree. Okay, now that's just a way of making up those two things. So now I'm associating a Christmas tree, an artificial Christmas tree, tree with second-hand value. You see how I'm doing this? If you come up with your own ideas, that's absolutely brilliant. They'll be better for you than mine are for you. But that's what I've got. Okay, let's move on to the next few things that we've got to learn. Now, we've got for, door, and directors. I would make the association then that the director has the best room in the building and sits behind a closed door. If you're summoned to the director, it feels like a big deal. You just knock gently on the door and really hope that they're not there and that you could just avoid going in right now, that it happens another time instead. Right, so I've made up a little bit of a story there about a for, door and directors. 5, hive. We've got to associate employees. This one's fallen nicely, hasn't it? How easy is that? Who are the people doing all the work? The employees. Sorry, directors. The employees. And the people the bees doing all the work are the worker bees in the hive. So I've got my worker bees in the hive, 5 hive, worker bees, employees, the people who are actually doing the work. We've got a little bit more to remember now. So sticks. Now we know that the people earning more than £8,500 have to fill out a P11D. I've got to associate that with sticks. Maybe it's not immediately obvious, maybe this is a bit contrived, but how about the P11D is made of paper? Paper is made of wood. Sticks are made of wood. So 6 sticks, paper, P11D. I know it's electronic these days, but there you go. 7 heaven, tax or value. Now, you may not think at first glance that tax has got anything to do with heaven, but the other part might be all value. To my mind, heaven is tops. It's value. It's the best thing that you can possibly aspire to. Heaven, it's where you get anything that you want. Great value is heaven. So that's how I'd associate heaven with tax all value. So the people earning more than £8,500 who are on a P11D are taxed at all the value, unlike the ones who are earning less than. Final bit, gate. If they're working part of the year, they get taxed proportionately. So, right, how can we think of proportions with a gate? How about then that, I bet you've seen this too, sheepdogs rounding up a bunch of sheep into a corner of a field. You know that's not a collective noun, is it, for sheep? A flock of sheep into the corner of a field. And instead of just letting them out of the gate into another field, there's somebody there at the gate using the gate to separate some of the sheep away from the others. So some of them have been cordoned off into a pen and the others are left to go into the field. So he's taking a proportion of them out. Does that make sense? So that's where I'm going with the gate. 8 gate, they are taxed. If they only work for part of the year, then they're taxed for that portion of the year. So what we've done here is we've taken the keywords that we're intending to learn about benefits in kind and we've attached them to the memory pegs which we already know like the back of our hand, don't we? Okay, I'm going to test you now. So what about benefits in kind are attached to gun? Yes, lower paid employees, that's right. So what about 2 shoe, Yeah, it was the price, wasn't it? Less than £8,500. That's the lower paid employees. Tree, what sort of tree was it? Second-hand Christmas tree. And they're taxed at second-hand value. Now, who's behind the door? We've got directors and who else? The employees. And they have to fill out a P11D. And they're taxed how? On all the value, that's right. But if any of them are only working for part of the year, they get paid proportionately. Just like those sheep, some of them are being portioned off. Okay, good. Why are we going to all this trouble? You need to get your brain's attention. And the harder you work with those visual images, the rhymes of the numbers and the objects and associating one with the other, the more your brain is going to remember all those funny little links. When you're making your notes, anything that's different will stand out in your mind's eye. And this has come about from an evolutionary point of view. You go back 10,000 years, and in the environment, if something looked a bit different, then you needed to be wary of it. You needed to pay attention to it and just make sure you knew what it was, and it wasn't something that was going to endanger you. So anything that was different, you'd pay attention to. It was important to your survival. And it's the same now. Remember, we're pretty much the same. Something that's different will tend to stand out. Something that stands out is easier to recall. So you can make some of your notes different in some way. So, for example, if I was making notes, I already know that I would find it more difficult to remember dates than actually what's going on. So I would set out, even before I started making my notes, I would expect to make my dates different in some way. I could do that by making them bigger on the page. Then they kind of loom up in my brain. I could make them in a different colour. That would also make them stand out. I could do something that was peculiar or rude, to draw something around them that made them not quite socially acceptable. Or I could do something funny with them that just gave me a bit of a chuckle. That would make them stand out. You can take a magazine photograph and write on that, for example. I bet you'd remember something that you wrote on if you chose a photograph very carefully. And for goodness sake, don't tell me what photographs you choose. But you would remember your notes because of the context of the photograph from the magazine. Do something silly with your notes, especially the bits that you need to remember. Warp or distort the bit that needs the hardest work doing to it. You'll find it easier to remember. So you won't want to use a beautiful new exercise book for your notes. Why? Because you'll be tempted to keep the whole thing looking really neat and pretty rather than concentrating on what's actually going to work for your notes. And by the same token, I want you to use blank A4 paper. So don't use something with lines because you'll be tempted to write in a linear fashion instead of looking for opportunities to draw shapes and pictures and symbols and patterns and set things out in a visual way. So use blank paper. Have loose paper because you'll be able to file it away in a ring binder, as you'll see later on why that's important. Your notes will change and develop. You will get better at writing brain-friendly notes. But even when you're writing one particular set of notes, there are times when you'll get halfway through what you're doing and you think, hang on, I've got a better way of doing this. And you'll want to start again and write the notes out again. And it's much easier doing that on a loose piece of paper because you can chuck the old ones out, replace them with the better ones. Okay, so that's all we've got time for this week. I hope for our new members that was a useful quick précis of everything you need to know, and for our older members a very useful recap of everything that you need to know. Next week is one of those funny weeks where I won't be able to deliver live, but you will find the recording of the second half of this presentation on your webinar page, which is where you'll find all the recordings of all the webinars from each week. So the week after that, everything will be back to normal again. So I look forward to hearing from you and to discover how your revision's been going. I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time. In the meantime, the second half of this presentation will be available for you on our website. Have a good week. Bye-bye.